Greetings, BookTube, and welcome to another episode of the Speculative Bookshelf. In the last week or so, there's been several videos of booktubers showing off their 10 or 20, if you're Michael K. Vaughan, favorite book covers. And so before that subject grows too stale, I thought I'd jump in with my top 10 list. And in the spirit of those other collectors who showed books from their personal collection, if you saw my introductory video, the book tag, the BookTube newbie video, I don't really have a book collection now. I moved overseas and my wife and I sold everything and just started with just the bare necessities here, which is not to say books are not bare necessities, but it would have cost a couple of arms and at least one leg to be able to ship those here. And we don't have the room in this tiny one-bedroom apartment either. So anyways, now all of my book collecting is done on ebooks. But anyways, like I said, in the spirit of the other YouTubers who showed their personal books, I will be just showing covers of books that I did own when I still had my library. So I did keep it to a top 10, but I have 3 honorable mentions, and that is only because the 3 honorable mentions are not in the speculative fiction genre, but they are great covers nonetheless, and I just wanted to share these with you. So first off is this one from Leisure Library by an author by the name of Spike Morelli, which is a pseudonym for William Newton. And this cover art, commonly referred to as Good Girl Art or GGA, is by Reginald Heed. This is one of his tamer ones. Some of his covers can get a little risque, but this gives you a good example. Next on my honorable mention list is this one from Popular Library. It's the Private Life of Helen of Troy by John Erskine. And this cover art was done by the great Rudolph Belarski. And as you can probably guess, what makes this a favorite among collectors is the semi-transparent nightgown worn by old Helen, which caused quite a stir at the time. And my last honorable mention comes from a book it's a little bit later vintage, and this cover asks the question, what do you do when you want to be a rock star, but your band hasn't hit it big yet? Well, in this case, you take on some modeling gigs, including modeling for paperback book covers. This is the Berkeley Medallion edition of Josephine Tey's The Franchise Affair. And I don't know if you can recognize that face, but that is Deborah Harry of Blondie playing the victim card there. So moving on to my actual speculative fiction top 10 list. First up, at the number 10 spot, comes Salem's Lot from Stephen King. And this is from the first Signet paperback edition. And it's quite striking, I think. It's an embossed black cover with just one crimson red drop of blood dripping from the corner of the mouth. And that makes for a quite striking image. And by the way, in the probably rare case of a publisher coming up with a better idea than the author, Stephen King's first title for this book was, the title he originally came up with was Second Coming. He then changed it to Jerusalem's Lot. The publisher said, that sounds a little too religious. Let's make it Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot, it became, and I think you'll probably agree that was a wise choice. My next two books come from Monarch Books, who are not known for their literary output. And they underscored that point by attaching some of the cheesiest cover art you'll find on some paperbacks. Take a look at this cover for The Flying Eyes by J. Hunter Holly. This looks like something from a B-movie poster from the 50s and 60s. And another Monarch book. This one's The Gods Hate Kansas by Joseph Millard. You gotta love a spaceman hanging tin on his spaceship while fending off a creepy space monster. Now, this next one's a sentimental favorite of mine. This is the book that introduced me to Elric of Melniboné. And this was a friend who actually introduced me. She was a fellow actor in this community theater that I was at, that I was involved in Port Austin, Michigan. And, while milling around backstage, I saw her reading this book. I asked her about it, and she said, "Oh, this is great. You got to read it." She gave it to me, and yeah, I had to read it, and I did, and I became hooked on Elric. And of course, this is by the great Michael Whalen, who has to figure on, almost anybody's top 10 cover art or cover artist list. Now, Frank Kelly Freas, he's probably most remembered for his covers that feature these sexy little nymphs with these huge doe eyes and have little stars and sparkly things all over the covers. But that's not my choice. My entry for Kelly Freas is this one for Frederick Brown's Martians Go Home. It's just a very, plain background with this impish Martian gazing out at you intently. And it just begs you to, pick it up and read it. Now, going back to the 50s, around 1950, 51 maybe, comes this Avon fantasy reader, or Avon fantasy novel, rather, for Jack Williamson's The Green Girl. And here we see a six-tentacled mutant Cabbage Patch Kid abducting the titular Green Girl. Pulp covers don't come any pulpier than this. I haven't been giving you the numbers during the countdown, but I believe this next one is number 4, counting down to number 1. And this comes from the husband and wife artist team of Leo and Diane Dillon, where we see an iconic Harlan Ellison cover for his collection of short stories, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And that is got to be one of the creepiest covers I've seen. Next comes my favorite cover from my favorite book, from one of my favorite series, from one of my favorite authors, Fritz Leiber. And this book comes from his Fafford and Grey Mouser series, where it's the 5th entry called The Swords of Lonkmar. The Swords of Lonkmar was the only novel in the series, with the others all being, short stories compiled from earlier publication in the pulp magazines. This cover features artwork by the late Jeffrey Catherine Jones. And this cover does, in fact, depict a scene which comes near the end of the story. Now, few artists are instantly recognizable when you see their art. Boris Vallejo and Frank Frazetta and Richard Powers also. Now, this cover is highly unusual in that the book was published with the cover horizontally. The image, you have to turn the book sideways to view the image, which I think was a brilliant idea. It maximizes your enjoyment of your inspection and enjoyment of the artwork. And my number 2 cover, coming up in the bridesmaid spot, as the professor of rock would say. I have this cover of Ray Bradbury's Golden Apples of the Sun, which also featured in Michael K. Vaughan's top 10 or top 20 cover video. I love how it's uncluttered by excessive text or even other editions by Ray Bradbury where they also overlay a line drawing of Bradbury on the cover. In fact, a later edition of this very book shows a smaller version of this picture with a line drawing of Bradbury. So this is definitely the better one. And that coloring and the montage of images inside which evoke scenes from the stories inside the book. I just love it. Now, speaking of Vallejo and Frank Frazetta, you may be expecting that my number 1 spot has been reserved for one of those artists. After all, who doesn't believe that those are the 2 greatest cover artists in the speculative fiction field? Well, not that I don't believe that, but I just have to defy convention. And my top choice is another one from Avon, number 285, An Earthman on Venus by Ralph Milne Farley. I mean, look at this. Who wouldn't be prompted to pick up this book and read it with that brilliant red background that shows off a beautiful Venetian princess with little insect antennae being defended by a valiant Earthman who's found himself a stranger in this strange land, and he's fending off a giant ant-man or Formian who is one of the dominant species on the planet Venus. Now this book, along with this one here, Into Plutonian Depths by Stanton Coblentz, got kind of an interesting story. They were the 2 books that kickstarted my vintage paperback collecting. Many of you are familiar with the used bookstore chain Half Price Books, and I had gotten a couple of collecting books. I think it was probably, I'm not sure, it might have been the Great American Paperback, where I saw an image of an Earthman on Venus. And then I also had this green hardback book that you may be familiar with called Huxley's Paperback Book Prices or Book Values. And it was in Huxley's where I saw an ad for a vintage paperback auction dealer called Black Ace Books in Los Angeles. After seeing images of An Earthman on Venus and Into Plutonian Depths, I wrote to Black Ace Books, that was before the email age, and inquired whether they had copies of either of these books. And to my surprise, not only did they have it, but Rose Idlet, who is the proprietor of Black Ace, she was a wonderful lady. I think by the second or third contact, I was calling her on the phone. And Rose told me that not only does she have the books, but she offered to send them to me on approval. And if I liked them, I could just send her the money for them then, $45 each for them, which I thought was a very good price. And you got to know I accepted that offer without hesitation. But, can you believe that? Here's a lady that doesn't know me from Steve Donoghue, and she's offering me to, offering to send $100 worth of books to me, without knowing the first thing about my character. Needless to say, that began a sort of long relationship with Black Ace Books. Though, like I said, they were mainly a auction dealer, and they put out monthly auction booklets that they mailed out. And I'm a cheapskate, and I usually, if not always, got outbid. So I didn't win too many books, but occasionally there'd be some set sale price lists from which I did obtain some books. So there you have it. If not the top 10 favorite book covers of mine, they are at least 10 of the top favorite book covers of mine. If you enjoyed this and liked it, I hope you'll like and subscribe. And leave a comment below. What are some of your favorite covers? And until next time, I'll see you in the comments. Happy reading.